Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sunday with Jay Barsky. This episode's guest is yoga instructor and one of my good friends, Matthew Kissler. I met Matt at a yoga teacher training a few years ago in Delray Beach, Florida. Since then, he's become a full-time yoga instructor and teaches at various studios around. You'll hear us talk about the humble beginnings of his yoga journey, a men's circle he recently started, and much more. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy our Sunday with Matthew Kissler. Matt Kissler, what's up? How you doing?
It's good to see you, my brother. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you here, man. So, I've asked you here because obviously, we're great friends and, how we met was doing the yoga instructor class. And, I want to say before we get into the questions, I'm happy that you got a chance to see a little of my comedy stand up too. I haven't seen a lot of my yoga friends have seen my stuff and my yoga bit too, which
I love that. Yeah, it's a good time. It's funny. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And one thing I was really careful, when I started doing yoga, I didn't want people to think that I was doing it just for material for a comedy. Just I do it so much that it just ended up becoming part of my material. But I'm glad that you liked it though.
Yeah, it's a good time. And it's always so cool to see my yoga friends, what they're doing outside of the yoga studios. So that was a treat for me.
Yeah. But so one thing I want to start, because we never really got into it, is how'd you get into yoga?
All right, so going back to the beginning, I grew up in northern New Jersey through New York City, and actually what really brought me down to Florida was a substance abuse issue that I was dealing with that ultimately I had no other option but to come down to South Florida. And when I came down to South Florida, I met somebody that lived right down the street from the yoga studio that we met at, which was called Anutara at the time. And I have dabbled with some yoga classes up in New York City for the physical aspect at a gym called Equinox. But it wasn't until I found this studio. I took 2 classes with a guy named Philip and our teacher Frankie. And I knew there was something so big in there for me.
Yeah.
I had the tight body. I had a lot of mental stuff I was working through. And I wouldn't say I enjoyed the first few classes, but I definitely knew that there was something important there for me in it. And it just kind of kept pulling me back. And I wound up practicing a couple times a week. And then side by side with a 12-step program, this practice, the science of yoga really just shifted everything in my life. And I started to feel some hope in my life. And
oh, wow.
Before yoga and the 12 steps, I was just in this absolutely hopeless space of despair. And just practice by practice, meeting by meeting, breath by breath, things started to open up and things started to feel like they were going to be okay.
I've taken yoga classes before. I did our teacher training, and the first time, and I think I've taken a hot yoga class before, but the first time that I really was oh my God, this is yoga was taking, Frankie's class, who we were trained under in the training. And it wasn't until I took the yoga teacher training, I'm okay, before I thought I could call myself a yogi, but then it wasn't until I got into the teacher training and I was wow, I have no idea. And just about the language, the postures, and, the training we did was intense.
Yeah. And I think Frankie is such a great teacher because I think a lot of people think about yoga and it's just this physical exercise.
Yeah.
And that's what I was looking for in New York City. And then when I came down here and I found Frankie and his teacher, and who turned out to be my teacher, Philip, I started to understand what yoga was really about. It wasn't just an exercise. It was a workout. It was a work in. And it's so much bigger than a 90-minute asana class. I say sometimes in my Raja classes, the measure of a yogi isn't your physical capabilities, and if you can get your foot over your head, it's what kind of person are you? What kind of life are you leading? In between walking in and out of the yoga studios, are you practicing ahimsa, the foundation of our yoga practice, where your thoughts and actions are not causing anybody harm around you? Are you being truthful? Are you stealing? Are you cheating? Are you all these things? It's so deep, and I think there's a lot of teachers that it's the focus is fully on the physical aspect of it, and there's so much potential, there's so much healing possible, but it goes so much deeper than that. I think in the South Florida community, and I think specifically at our school and our teacher training lineage, I think we are so blessed to have such knowledgeable teachers.
Yeah.
And when I go around and teach at different places, people always say like, "Oh, you must be from Anuttara. Your knowledge of Sanskrit and your knowledge
Yeah.
of the Hindu traditions, and it's such a gift." Yeah.
I love the community here too. It's just like Anatara that when we started, but just other places. And since our teacher training, one thing that I really wanted to do, kind of like how I did with comedy when I started like really understanding it, is exploring different areas, communities, just different studios, and we have like an abundance of great teachers too all around, and just try to learn from them. And I didn't know there's a whole other journey outside. I mean, after our training, that was just the beginning. Like, I just started exploring different ways of like practicing yoga after that.
It's the beauty of it. It's so deep. There's so many different types of yoga, not even just the asana. Within the asana practice, there's vinyasa, hatha, raja, yin, but there's also bhakti, and there's karma yoga, and there's kriya yoga, and there's all these different ways to practice yoga that don't involve a strenuous exercise. Bhakti has become a big part of my practice. One of our dear teachers, Barbara, has like really inspired me to walk the path of bhakti yoga. And, it's one of those things that I laugh about, like trying to talk about and explain what happens in yoga, and especially like something like bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of the heart. And it's like, you can't just sit here in the conversation and you can't try to explain to your viewers what's happening, what's happened. Like, you gotta join us for a kirtan and step onto the mat and be a part of it. It's so big.
Do you have a favorite practice of yoga?
It's hard to say. I mean, I love a vinyasa. It's kind of like a dance. You're moving quickly. But there's something so special about it all. I just got trained most recently in 26 and 2, which is from Bikram. And there's such beauty about every different thing. Like in Bikram, it's just, there's nothing fancy about it. You're just standing there, pose into pose into pose, and you hold each pose for an extended period of time. So where I would say in vinyasa, students can kind of like skirt around certain poses. You're just there for a breath, and then you're in and out. In hatha or Bikram, which is a type of hatha yoga, it's just like looking at yourself, and there's no avoiding anything. Like, you're just putting yourself out there, bare to be seen. And then Raja is more of a yoga of the mind. It's more of a meditative practice. What I say, it's just as much a practice in meditation as it is an asana practice. So it really is like, it's hard to say. And the truth is, like, I still have so much more exploring to do, even as like an established teacher down in South Florida. Like, kind of like you said, I found Anuttara first, which is now Atta, and I like got so connected, and it took me years to really venture out. My girlfriend, at one point, we said we're going to do like a tour of the local yoga studios, and we went to one other place in Delray, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think I ruined yoga for myself by going to this one place first. So I really didn't explore too much until just a couple of years back, and I found this new teacher, James, who's absolutely sensational, and I'm really just like doing some exploring, and I think that's part of what's so beautiful about it. Where I'm at in my teaching journey right now, I wouldn't necessarily say that I have a home studio. And eventually one day I hope to maybe, I don't even know if that's true, but like right now I have 2 to 5 classes at a few different places. And I just love it because I'm just meeting such amazing, special people at all these different spaces. And when I get to connect with my students outside of the studios like we're doing here, I'm just always fascinated by like the brilliance, the magnificence that's behind these people. Like, I know their asana practice. I give them hugs on their way into class. And then I get an opportunity. We ran our men's circle, and I got to connect with 20 guys on like such a deeper level. And it's so powerful. Like the stories and the energies that are coming into these yoga shalas, these studios. And like when it all comes together and you get this collective of people that are just giving it their all for like a common purpose. It's magical. It's so powerful, especially right now with like the heaviness, the darkness of the collective. I find such solace in the yoga studios, and they're just spaces where we can all come together and like put our masks down, put our perspective about these conflicts around the world down, and we could just open our hearts and be with each other, no matter what skin color you are, what your race, your religious preference. Like, we just get to show up and like sit next to people and just love each other without divisiveness, without prejudices. It's just, I don't know, it's special. It's unexplainable if you've never like been in there and felt it.
Yeah. So what made you want to become a yoga instructor?
I think when I hear that question, I think of one of the ideas from the AA 12-step program is that we keep what we have by giving it away. And as I started to notice the shifts within me from my yoga practice and just looking at these yoga teachers as like guides and models in my life, I just hit a point. It was like one day in practice coming out of Shavasana, and I was just like, I don't have it. It wasn't like something I wanted to do. It's something that I needed to do.
Yeah.
I had a really well paying job up in New Jersey and New York City. I went back and forth. Even after I got sober, I went back there a year later, and I just like knew that I was meant to be down here doing this. And it was a big leap of faith, you know. I had no idea like what I was doing, if this was going to work out. I had an established career up north, and I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy, and I kind of hit a point where I knew that no high-paying career, no matter how big of a paycheck I got each week, it wasn't gonna fill this like void in my heart.
Yeah.
And when I look around, when I stepped into these yoga studios and saw these teachers and like felt the impact that they were having on me and these people around me, I knew that I wanted to do that. And you know, it started with our teacher training that we did together. I mean, honestly, at this point, I've done like four more teacher trainings.
Yeah.
It's just like I have a thirst to learn, and the more I learn about it, the more I want to share it. And it's more of like a answering of a calling, of a
Yeah.
higher calling than something I wanted or desired to do. Like that's my dharma. This is what I'm supposed to be doing in this lifetime. And there's still days where I'm like thinking, am I crazy for I've given up the paycheck? And
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's like the universe just keeps giving me these symbols, these like validations that I'm on the right path and this is what I'm
Okay.
meant to be doing. And it's just been a few years now I've been teaching, and I've never felt so aligned and like in my purpose as I do my whole life at this point now, because I'm back and forth between like spending time with my son, who's now 19 months old at home, most beautiful boy in the world, Jonah, and my wife Jen, and then going to these yoga studios. And I drive all the way to Fort Lauderdale some days, and people say it's crazy, and it is a little crazy, but I just love doing this. It's like, it feeds my soul. It really like it's an answering of a higher calling more than it's any wanting or desiring to do it. It's something that I felt so divinely called to do.
So do you currently just teach vinyasa practices, or because I mean, obviously I took in your vinyasa class, but I didn't know if that was the only like practice that you're teaching for now.
I teach vinyasa at a few different places, and then actually I followed my teacher Philip down to Fort Lauderdale to do hit my last teacher training, which happened to coincidentally be at a 26 and 2, which is formerly a Bikram studio. And that's when, you know, I think I could have gone my whole yoga career never taking this type of yoga class. And when I found it through my teacher, who was doing like a kind of hybrid training, that's something that I've become very passionate about teaching. And I teach Raja also down in Fort Lauderdale. So
Okay.
I'm teaching a little bit of everything here. I'm going to be teaching a few classes a week at a treatment center, which feels like so purposeful for me, which I'm really excited about. It combines like everything I want to be doing, supporting people that are in a place that I've been in, and I think that's important, like relatability. And I'm just floating around and just seeing what comes to me. And we're doing these men's circles now, which has been so powerful. I did a breathwork course to start teaching some, like we call it holotropic inspired breathwork, which you saw what that's about a little bit at our men's circle. And it's mostly vinyasa. I think in today's world, vinyasa is the most popular style.
Can you describe our listeners about the breathwork practice that we kind of went over in the men's circle?
Yeah, so there's something called holotropic and breathwork that was created by a guy named Stan Groff and his wife. And basically, like holotropic loosely means like a journey to wholeness. And it's just like a repetitive, what we did, which actually is combining this guy named David Elliott, a 3-part breath. So it's like an inhale through the belly, an inhale through the chest, and a big exhalation. And my wife and I, we love this analogy of likening it, and you can use it for breath work specifically, but also the asana practice and all of these like, modalities that we're talking about. We call it like a shaking of a snow globe, because in yoga we talk about how we have issues in our tissues, is like the quote you hear a lot. But we just have this dormant energy. We have stuff just like sitting in our bodies. And when we breathe that way, when we move our bodies in an asana practice, we love to just liken it to a shaking of a snow globe. So especially like I teach some early morning classes, and you sleep overnight and you step up onto your yoga mat, and all this stuff is just sitting in your body, kind of lurking around. And as you start breathing, as you start moving, you just see a lot of stuff coming up to the surface. And then you get to use your discretion of what's ready to go and what you want to hold on to. And, that's one of the scariest parts. I was just talking to someone the other day who said her brother-in-law said he felt something demonic is the word he used coming up out of his left hip in a practice a while back, and he's like, I can never do yoga again. And I like just kind of chuckled at it because I'm thinking like in yoga you might feel some big things coming up, as like your left hip is considered a big one. And I could see how somebody that's not really established in their practice might feel like something demonic was coming up out of them. But it's just like about like sitting and breathing and knowing that like there's nothing to be afraid of. There's no demons in you. There's stuff that needs to be released, but you gotta be fearless. We have a mudra, a hand signal called Abhaya Mudra, where you bring the 5 fingers together and like push fear away essentially. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. We're talking about this connection of body, mind, and spirit. And we talked about kind of how our teachers in our lineage go beyond the body and really talk a lot more about like the mind. But I think the body is the first step. It's kind of like everybody wants to learn to ascend, but like you got to learn to ground first.
Yeah.
And there's massive physical benefits available through this practice. I was just having beautiful experience on my mat this past Sunday. My cousin in New York City was running the New York City Marathon, which I've run several times when I was in active addiction, and I hurt myself badly running these marathons. I was not listening to my body. I hurt my knees. I really hurt myself, especially in the last race I did. And there's certain asanas specifically that I really truly credit for providing some significant healing, and especially my knees. And I was having this beautiful experience. This past Sunday, they ran the New York City Marathon, and I was just like sitting on my mat in this one pose in 26 and 2 we call Supta Vajrasana, where it's an intense posture. You feel a lot in your Achilles and your knees and your hips. And I just like had such a big smile about kind of like the change in my life. And I still love running. I don't do it the same way I did it. It's beautiful. It's great for my mind. But I was just like kind of sitting in there thinking about my knee injury from my marathon. It just was kind of like a beautiful symbol of the transition that I've had in my life, where quite frankly, my intention for running marathons when I was running them was to desperately try to show the world that I was okay. And I was thinking doing sick things like putting an Instagram picture up with my medal that I finished a marathon would convince people outside looking in that like, oh, Matthew's doing great. Like he's in a good place in his life. He's got a good job. He's running marathons. Like he must be okay. Where like deep down inside, I just wanted it to be over. Like to put it pretty frankly, I was so helpless and I hated myself, and I thought everybody around me hated me too. And I believe like I think about my recovery and like recovery more than just substance abuse, and yoga has played a massive part in my healing. And I wouldn't be where I was today without also having a 12-step program in the beginning, but I wouldn't be where I am today with just a 12-step program and not a yoga practice. So the two tools were so important for me, especially in the beginning when I was so delicate and fragile. And I haven't been involved in the AA program for a couple of years now. I've been sober, but the yoga practice has kind of become my recovery program. And I think I'm very, very open about it. I mean, I'm talking about it on your podcast, but even in my classes, I'm never shy about talking about where I've been and where I come from. And the more I talk about my story and the more I share my story, the more people come up to me after class. If I say in a class that I'm in recovery from a substance abuse issue, every single time, 10 times out of 10, somebody comes up to me after class and says, oh my gosh, I really appreciated you sharing that. Like, I'm also in recovery. Like, this is my story. And that's like the bigger truth of it all. Like that yoga's really showed me, because yoga is about like just coming to terms and like making peace with everything around you, everything from your past, not worrying about your future. It's all about presence and mindfulness. And I believe more than ever, it's not a belief, it's a knowing. That, like as we can come to peace with our stories and begin to share our story, I'm not saying, I feel called to say it. I don't share it because I think it does anything for me. I do it because this is my calling, and I know that as I heal myself and I share my story, it's going to show people that are in that exact situation that there is a way out. Because when you're in addiction, when you're in those depths of hell, it doesn't matter what somebody tells you. Like, people can say the most beautiful things in the world, but like, you need to see a model, you need to be shown. And I just see so clearly, the more I share my story, the more I see so much overlap in the rooms of recovery AA and the rooms of yoga studios. And I just still think, and it's a little unfortunate that this is still kind of a thing, but there's such a stigma around recovery and addiction, like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like out here super open about it when it's
Yeah.
appropriate. But like, a lot of people are not ready to let anybody know. In my first couple of years in these yoga studios, I did everything in my power to make sure nobody knew about my past and what brought me into the yoga studios. And then I kind of got to know some of these people, and I realized almost all of us have had some sort of
Yeah.
journey of that sort that brought us into yoga studio. So
One of the things you mentioned a few times was the men's circle, which I participated in. So what made you want to start that?
so I think for me, it's always been men that have held the space where I've been able to really fully open up. And there's just something in our society that men have this belief that we need to be tough and we need to like put on a smile over whatever suffering face we're really wearing. And even as a father, there's like a lot of pressures to provide for the family. There's a lot of expectations of society of a father and a man. And I think things are shifting, but I still think there's a lot of pressure on men. And like, I'm kind of talking about, like, the more I'm sharing my story around these studios and these shalas, like, the more I see that there's a need for a space exclusively for men. And at the end of the day, it's always been men that I've been able to really rip myself open and like
Mm-hmm.
let them see every piece of me. My most recent sponsor, Daniel, is a guy in Boynton Beach, and I had this guy named Kevin up in New York City. And this guy Kevin, I met him completely. I was gonna say by accident, but there's no accidents in this world. Now, the more I see it, it's like the universe is very detail oriented and making sure it gets done when it needs to get
Yeah.
done. And I remember I had just got into a bad accident. This was like my lowest point. And I had this like 7-day period where I was kind of waiting for my parents to come home from a trip. And I stumbled into a meeting that I'd never been to in my whole life. And this guy, Kevin, with 30 years sober, stumbled into the same meeting. And, well, he didn't stumble. He walked in with his head held high. And he asked me to talk and share my story that night. And I was, quite honestly, I was walking to this meeting looking at these skyscrapers thinking, like, which one's high enough for me to end this all right now?
Mm-hmm.
And for probably 7 years now, this man and I have exchanged messages every single day. Like, this man cares about me so deeply, I won't say more than anybody like I've ever known, but there is something so special about the bond between men. And I think if you had two women up here talking, they would say the same thing. That sisterhood, the brotherhood. There is something about the relatability of it, I just think that there's a lot of men that won't open, whatever the reason is, energetically around women. So, in AA, there's a lot of men's meetings where I see a lot more vulnerability. And I think around women, sometimes guys just really put a mask on. And
Yeah.
so I think that's why it's like, I always felt a little funny about it, but I think it's important. And I think everybody understands.
And you also, like, I saw a while back that you are doing retreats. Is that right? So you
Yeah.
had one in Costa Rica. So can you describe your experience and what's that about?
Yeah, it was a profound, profound experience. I did it with my wife, Jen. We're creating a company called Inward Bounds Retreats. And we had 10 yogis that joined us. We went to a beautiful new retreat space called Vajrajara in the Diamante Valley, which is owned by a student from Atta. And it was so funny. I think this is what it's all about. The day before the retreat guests arrived, we were on the property, and I turned to my wife and I was like, I'm not so sure about this. This is like a weird mix of people that are coming
Okay.
tomorrow. And I was like, I know it'll be great, but I was like having not anxiety, but a little like, even concern feels like a
Yeah.
harsh word, about how the group is going to come together. And I mean, retreats are unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
because you are just, we call it inward bounds, because no matter where you're going, like the end goal is going inwards. But so
Right.
it's like almost contradictory that we're taking the group to Costa Rica. But I think there's something so valuable in removing yourself from like your daily stimulus, all the things that on a day-to-day basis bother you and irritate you, and just relocating yourself directly into the middle of the jungle where there's no distractions, there's nothing around, and you're just there for 5 nights and 6 days, and you really have no option but to just go within. And it was such an incredible experience. I was absolutely amazed by the way this group showed up and came together, and like we're just loving on each other, dancing. All
Okay.
like by the third day, even it was truly like such a validating experience for us, and kind of just like another like pat on the back and saying like you're doing the right thing, like keep walking this, keep
Yeah.
going. And we had, I've been given permission to like talk a little bit. We had a one woman who has lost a child years ago, and it's humbling, this work I'm doing, like because all I'm doing is holding space for people to have their own processes. Like I can't heal you, like I could hold space and I could play music and I could teach you what I know that has worked for me. I had this woman that came, and years ago she lost a child, and on the last day of the retreat she said, I just want to share that like this time with you all has shown me that healing is possible. And
Okay.
I'm just sitting there like, yo, she's giving us credit. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, I don't want credit. Like, I just gave a deposit and held this space and reserved this place. I'm like, yeah, like I'm a guide, I'm a teacher. I am somebody that has healed a lot in myself. But then I think about like the magnitude of the work that's happening on these retreats in these yoga shalas, and like it's big stuff. So my wife is a big breathwork facilitator, so she did a couple cacao and breathwork ceremonies, and we both teach yoga, so we did daily yoga practices. We had one day off property. We went to the amazing beach. We had beautiful locally sourced meals, 3 a day. We did a lot of meditation, and we had a lot of fun. It's always like finding this balance on this healing path and in these practices like asana and meditation, of recognizing that it's deeply profound, powerful work, and also like remembering to have some fun and like to smile and not to take ourselves so seriously all the time. It's important to find that balance. So I think the retreat was such a powerful experience for us. So we're hoping to do it at least once a year.
Okay.
And it's beautiful.
Are you going to do it at the same location in Costa Rica?
At least for another year.
Okay.
And then we'll see what the people want,
Okay.
We loved it. It's magical. And like part of it for us is like getting ourselves out there. Like,
Yeah.
I'd never been to Costa Rica before that.
Okay.
And like for me, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
telling me this is work. Like, okay.
I know like one thing you practice a lot is meditation. Maybe if that's one of the things you can mention. So if you want to share with our listeners, what practices do you do to kind of relax yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, meditation is, you already said, first and foremost. I think every person on this planet needs to take 5 minutes a day. And I don't try not to make those like big sweeping statements, but I believe everybody that hears this and start with 5 minutes. I have people that do an hour a day. I usually do 20 minutes a day. And I just think it's so valuable in this fast-paced world to like take some time and sit down. And I think there's an aversion to it because this is a society that is pretty big on like just distracting and numbing ourselves. And we wake up, we get out of bed, and we move. We start moving, and we don't stop moving until we get in bed to go to sleep. And I just think often it's an unconscious avoidance technique. It's a fear of looking at something in us that we don't want to see, that we don't want to believe is there. And because meditation is just bearing it all, and like your eyes are closed, but you're looking at everything through the one eye, through like the lens of truth. There's stuff in us, in every one of us, that like is unconsciously ruling everything that we do, everything that we say. There's so many people, like I hear it all the time, like, I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, like, and it's like because there's some trauma, there's something that it like has evoked something in you that like you just haven't looked at yet. And that's like the possibility. That's what we're doing here. Like we're doing a deep dive within and like pulling stuff out
Yeah.
little by little, and sometimes like a lot at a time. And it's deep work. It's a lot of meditation. It's asana practice 5-6 days a week. I could be better about giving myself a little more rest with my physical body with the asana practice. But I love it. I love being in a community. I love being in a room with people that are just putting it all out there and allowing themselves to be seen and heard. And it's daily walks with my dogs, with my son, which isn't it sounds so simple, but it's just being out and like feeling the sun on my skin.
Mm.
It's preparing healthy meals for my family. It's gardening. We have this amazing, it's not a big piece of property, but we have a little bit of land that when we bought this house 5 years ago, thank goodness we did it that time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a bare sand lot. It was dirt. It looked like
Mm-hmm.
everything was dead. And now if you walk into the back, I'll send you a picture after this
Okay.
when I get home. Like we go into the back and we have banana trees, we have vegetable
Oh,
gardens, we
nice.
have so much food growing, we have butterflies and birds
Oh,
and
wow.
all sorts of like beautiful stuff, and something about just like tending to that and like almost like another baby that's like
Yeah.
become such a passion project of ours. And every time I go out there, even if it's just like sitting there like with a hose walking around the backyard for 30 minutes watering the plants, it's purposeful.
Yeah.
It's like soothing and it's quiet and it's just time with myself. And yeah, like anything can be like everything is yoga if you're conscious and like aware of your breath and like in the present moment. So like it's not really so much about what you're doing, it's about how you're doing it, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like anything can be a practice in relaxation and mindfulness. But like it's all the normal ones. I love to get on my bike. Now I put a little kid's seat on the back of my bicycle.
Okay.
So I take Jonah with
Yeah,
me a lot.
nice.
So a lot of time at the beach. It's all about like connecting with myself and connecting with nature.
Can you share a little bit of like your routines? I mean, your meditation. Like, is this something that I do it like every first thing in the morning? But like, how is your routine? Whether it's starting off with meditation, obviously with your yoga practice, gardening. Can you share a little bit of those?
Yeah, I like to think I have a routine, but when you have a 19-month-old baby boy running around your house, your routine begins to kind of shape around him. And I meditate all different times of the day. Usually, often when he goes and takes his like late morning nap is a time that I like to meditate. But something big, I've gotten into Ayurveda with Frankie. He does like a seasonal course, and so when I wake up in the morning, there are very set things. We call it a dinacharya, a daily routine. So I do oil pulling. I use a neti pot, which cleanses the nasal passages. Morning tonic. Just like in the morning, I'll have a glass of warm water with lemon or lime.
Okay.
So that citrus gets the digestive system moving. I wouldn't say I have like so much of a set routine. I definitely did have a very set routine, and then when Jonah came around, things kind of shook up a little bit. And there's always like coming and going. So sometimes I'm think I should get more of a routine and kind of just like flowing with life as it comes right now. But it's not as loose as I'm saying it. It's like it is daily meditation. Like so if it's getting to like the late afternoon, I'm thinking like, all right, I would like to start to prioritize. And sometimes Jen and I, my wife, will be like, oh, you go take 20 minutes and I'll walk with Jonah and then we'll switch. So it's as a father, it's definitely a little less organized.
Okay. Are there any practices that help motivate you that you may want to recommend for our listeners?
I mean, I mostly like a lot of people would say they have an aversion to the yoga asana practice because they're not flexible, they have injuries. So for those people, I would say meditation. For people that aren't a little apprehensive about getting into meditation because their mind is so crazy, I would say you go take an asana class, because in the asana class there's meditation. Like it's in all these things, and it's like if you don't think you could sit down for 20 minutes a day and breathe without going crazy and like angering yourself about all the thoughts that are coming up, go get on a bicycle and watch every breath that you take for 20 minutes for a 20-minute bike ride. Like that's what I'm like. Well, I was kind of trying to get before. You can do these mindfulness practices in alternative settings and places. So like I would say you have a dog, go take a dog for 20-minute walk. Watch every single step you take. Say right, left, right, left. Watch every breath, inhale, exhale. And it's just really all about just like living a little bit more mindfully and paying a little more attention to what you're doing when you eat. When you are eating your breakfast, put your phone away and like chew on your food and find gratitude for the nourishment instead of like, this is how I used to be. I used to do 7 things at once. I have a TV on in the kitchen. Like, we don't even have TV in our house anymore. Like, I would have a TV out, I'd have my phone, have a book out, and I'm trying to just get as much done as possible. And like thinking that's productivity, but there's nothing productive about that because you're not like, there's nothing mindful about it. It's for me, it all just starts with slowing down.
Yeah.
Like, doing one thing at a time, like giving your attention to what you're doing. If you're eating a delicious salad, pay attention to the salad. Like give some energy to that food like, as you're preparing it. Yeah, there's practices I could recommend. Like I would start by saying, go find a beginner's asana class. Go sit in meditation on YouTube, on anything. There's all sorts of guided meditations if you feel like you need help. Doesn't have to just be sitting and watching your breath for 20 minutes. Like there's a lot of, Joe Dispenza has all sorts of amazing meditations. So it's just, I say just like slow down. Find a window of time every single day. And it doesn't have to be a 20-minute meditation. It doesn't have to be a 90-minute asana class. Like go into your backyard, lay out a towel, and just start moving your body around. And it's like, there's no right or wrong. It's wrong if it's causing you pain in your body.
Yeah.
And it's right if it feels good in your body.
Is there anything you're working on that our listeners should watch out for?
There's always stuff coming up. I don't have anything so specific. I'm trying to start to think about not so much a teacher training, but more kind of like a fun vinyasa type workshop.
Okay.
Which I think I would do down in Fort Lauderdale. Just kind of keep finding my students are so amazed by, they love to hear like the stories behind the poses. There's like a book that I read.
Yeah.
And there's so much beautiful like history behind what we're doing. And if you go to a basic asana class, you're not going to hear much of this. Like, you don't have time to sit up there and tell you stories about the goddess Kali while you're in Kali asana.
Yeah.
But so I think like I want to create a little program, a little workshop, a little space for people that are interested in hearing about the history of yoga in ancient India. And there's definitely going to be another men's circle in Delray at some point in December. Yeah, some breathworks we're planning. And yeah, check out my Instagram. That's where I post all my stuff. Yeah, I think a lot of it happens spontaneously. I think there's a lot of collaboration going on with a lot of different teachers in my life. Because I think I love this quote. It says like we talk about like the competitiveness, but I think at like the very top, like we're not competing. We're all trying to collaborate and see what we could build together.
Are there any final thoughts you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah. The most important thing for me is just like being courageous, and you can't pick and choose what you want to look at and like what you're ready to heal. Like I believe that you just have to show up willing to strip yourself down and like let every piece of you be seen. I had an 8-year intense opiate addiction, and like I said earlier, I desperately tried to make sure nobody knew about that when I first came into these yoga studios. And again, like your life is your message. You know, I could go in front of my yoga classes and I could give these, like I just gave a Gandhi quote, and I could give all these things that these seers and these great sages have come up with because it's cute and it's wise. But at the end of the day, you need to, or I'll speak in the I format, like I need to go up there and tell my story.
Yeah.
You know, Philip, he created something called Anuttara Raja. And he always says, like, teach my exact flow because it tells a very precise story. And at some point, I don't teach at his school anymore. But I said, you know what? What if I have my own story to tell? And this man's a genius. And it'd be easy to say, like, I'm going to teach his exact flow and call it Anuttara. But at some point, I recognize that I have a voice. I have a story to tell. I have a message to give to the world. And every one of us does. No matter how insignificant you think you are, how small you think you are, if you allow yourself to be heard, if you allow yourself to be seen, there's somebody out there that needs to hear your story, that needs to hear your message. And you're doing everybody a disservice by sitting in the corner and playing small and thinking that you don't have something to offer to the world, because every single one of us was created as we were individually, so unique, different bodies, different skin color, all of it. And it's for a reason. Every one of us is an intricate part of the full collective. Like my teacher Philip says, like, if you weren't here, the collective would be out of balance, because every one of us plays a vital, vital role in keeping the balance. And, it's just so important. Like, but it starts inside. Like, you need to come to peace with yourself, and you need to like find love in your own heart. You need to find peace in your own body before you go out and spread it to the world. Because, as above, so below, as within, so without. Like, you need to create what you're looking for outside of you, inside of you, and then watch it vibrate outside of you. And I kind of been saying something I've been going with, and what I've been offering is a belief. I almost would call it a knowing that we're hearing about is war and conflict and like the darkness of the world. And my belief is like what keeps me going. I was raised in a Jewish household, so I pretty feel this conflict in Israel has been like weighing pretty heavy on me. And I'm going into these classes, and what I'm kind of offering to people that are struggling is just the possibility, if you're willing to entertain it, the energy that we're building, that we're cultivating in these yoga studios, in these meditation halls, is powerful enough that it's being felt so far beyond those four walls, that like what we're doing is the balance for all the darkness that you're hearing about on the news. And that like maybe, just maybe, every day I meditate, and I have this belief that like I can send energy to these hostages, these children on both sides of the conflict that are being affected by it and that are scared and alone. And my belief is that what we're doing is creating this massive energy, this massive power that is being felt all over the world. And that's what it's about for me. It's about showing up and thinking that as I work on myself, I can send shockwaves out throughout the universe. And that's all we can do. When we want to figure out how to solve all the problems of the world, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to feel very big and helpless. So it's like, just bring it inside of you and start with yourself. And that requires like a deep dive within and an allowance of everything and anything that's going to come up and out. Because that's all part of the journey. That's all part of the journey. And when we find peace with where we've been, we can now use our experiences. We're armed with this wisdom, with these experiences, to go out and help the next person. And ultimately, I think that's what the human journey is about, like finding peace and then walking each other home, as Ram Dass says. That's all we're doing here. At the end of the day, we're all going back home. We can't take any material riches with us. None of this wealth, these bank accounts, these numbers that we're obsessed with, none of it's going to come. But what kind of impact did you leave on the world?
Yeah.
Did you help some people? Did you make the world a little bit better place?
Yeah.
That's my message. That's, I could sit up here and preach, but if you know me, I think you know that my message is more about my action. It's about seva, selfless service to the greater good. And that's my priority. That's my mission. That's my job.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you for, sharing your story and your final thoughts. I think that was beautiful words that you were mentioning. But Matthew Kissler, thank you so much for joining us on Sunday with Jay Barsky.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for listening to our episode with Matthew Kissler. Follow him on all his socials, which you may find in the episode notes. I hope you enjoyed our episode. Please rate and comment on the podcast to help make it grow. If you wish to follow me, all my socials are at I am Jay Barsky. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.